First you draw a circle, then you dot the eyes, and add a great big smile. And presto! It's Kirby! Where did I go wrong? Kirby's Adventure was released in North America in May of 1993, and it was the first game in the series. Wait, no it wasn't. That title goes to Kirby's Dream Land on the Game Boy, which was released pretty much a year before it. And then 2 years later, the third mainline Kirby game was released in 1995, and it was called Kirby's Dream Land 2? Okay, so the naming might be a bit off, but they probably just did this to make all the handheld games line up. You have 1 on Game Boy, 2 on Game Boy, and the third game is on console, which is actually the 5th mainline Kirby game. I give up. Weird naming aside, we're going to be talking about Kirby's Adventure on the NES for this one, not the remake on Game Boy Advance. Now listen, the remake is fine, but the tone of the remake is completely different than the original. The original is cute and colorful, while the remake kinda goes for a realistic, colorful style. I'm not sure what to call this, but if you look at them both side by side here, you can tell it's a completely different tone. Though luckily, other than that, they're pretty much the same game. The remake has a few more minigames and lets you play as Meta Knight as well as a bonus for beating it, which is cool. So at the end of the day, play whichever one you want, whichever one you like the look more of. Whatever you choose, it's up to you. But for me, I decided to play the original, because I've heard that this is one, if not the best, NES game ever made. When people talk about this game on the NES, they say, yeah, it was great, but I don't see a lot of people talk about how technically impressive this game is, because I believe that this game is one of the most technically impressive games on the entire NES. Up there was Castlevania 3 and Mario Bros 3. A lot of threes here. This game has dynamic backgrounds, many different enemies, sometimes multiple on screen at once, many different minigames, tons of animations where most games on the NES had a walk and jump animation and that's it. While I was playing this, I was very impressed. This game surprised me that it was even on this console. It controls like it would be on a next generation console, if that makes sense. I was blown away. However, who cares? Being technically impressive is great and a huge positive for a game, don't get me wrong, but that all falls flat if the game isn't good. But I'm just gonna be honest, this is a Kirby game, of course it's gonna be good. Is there even a bad Kirby game out there? The worst ones are just kinda they're not really that bad. Anyway, while of course the game is good, every single game out there has its negatives, so I'm gonna give an overview of my experience with Kirby's Adventure. And if you couldn't tell, yes, this is indeed my first time playing this. Starting with the gameplay itself, it's a 2D platformer where you have to get to the end. Good stuff. Pushing left and right lets you move, A is jump, and B is to inhale. You can also push down on the D-pad and then A or B to slide, which is cool. But you can also fly by mashing up on the D-pad. Now I'm gonna be honest, I don't like that button being up. It feels weird. It might just be a me thing, but it messes with my brain. Sometimes I want to jump and fly, so what I would do is I would try and jump and then push the jump button again. But that doesn't work. You have to push jump and then up on the D-pad to start flying. And that confused my brain, so then sometimes I would try and jump, and instead of pushing the jump button, I would push up on the D-pad to try and jump, but that would just make me float on the ground. It really confused me. This could just be a me thing, but I'm not sure if it is, because the later games in this series changed this to just mashing the jump button to fly, so who knows. But I feel like mashing jump to fly is a much better idea. I could go on for an hour on why making the jump button on the D-pad up is a bad idea. You're safe this time. Anyway, those are the controls. They are very simple, and that's a good positive. But Kirby is mostly known for his copies abilities. But did you know, gaming, that this was the first game he had it in? In the first game on the Game Boy, you could only suck up stuff and shoot them back out of the enemy. You couldn't actually copy anything. You can do that in this game too, but this game has the copy mechanic. And this game has the copy mechanic because of how simple the previous game was with the way you attack enemies. If you don't know what the copy mechanic is somehow, it's when Kirby swallows an enemy and gets their power. To put it simply, do you swallow a fire dude? You can now breathe fire. It's kind of like that. But you see, the first game was considered super easy to play, and for the second game they wanted to keep the simple gameplay while also expanding on options to make it simple enough to play, but also different enough so the non-casual players get something out of it. And I think they did a decent job on this. You can experiment with so many different power-ups and replay the game using different strategies with different copy abilities. A casual player obviously isn't going to do this, but a quote-unquote gamer might actually do this. I know for a fact someone out there is running through this with the high jump power only. In fact, the reason the minigame exists in this is because they thought by adding the copy abilities, people would think the game is too hard. And these minigames are fun as hell, by the way. You have a crane game, a cowboy gun game, so much variety, but I can never beat DDD in the gun game here. The reaction you need is just insane. Am I too old? Am I washed? But the minigames were designed to be easy to understand, so anyone can hop in and try them, which again, they succeeded at. These are very simple games to get into. So I've been talking about them wanting to up the difficulty compared to the last game for a while now. Even the devs were worried that people would think that the game is too hard. So is that the case? This game is for babies! The game is definitely more difficult than the original, sure, but it's still way too easy. I never really got stuck on any part other than maybe the final boss, which took maybe about a maximum of 5 tries. But even then, they give you so many lives in this game that you can just walk through it. I don't even know what I would call this difficulty. It's a mix between a success and a failure for the game. It's a success as they did it. They made an easy NES game, which is honestly a good thing since most NES games would make you want to rub your face against a cheese grater. But it's also a failure because if you're a quote-unquote gamer like me, it just becomes so easy that it loses its excitement near the end and slowly becomes boring. But luckily, the game is short enough so it's not that big of a deal. And honestly, that's perfectly fine if a game is easy. There's nothing wrong with that at all so long as it's fun, and Kirby has proven that right. Almost every single Kirby game out there is easy, but some of them have side modes which crank up the difficulty a ton, which is the right way to make a game that you want to make a casual experience. This game does that as well, kind of. If you get 100% score in this game, you unlock an extra game which Kirby only has 3 hit points instead of 6, and the game doesn't save, which is honestly more of an annoyance than being hard, but whatever. While this is technically a difficulty increase, only decreasing Kirby's health and that's pretty much it is kinda lame. Especially when the previous game did it much better, where the enemies are replaced with much harder ones and bosses get new moves, actually changing the game itself, which adds way more replay value than just reducing your health by 3 points. But like I said before, I believe they put their effort in adding the replay value to the copyability aspect rather than the difficulty aspect. There are times in the game where you can interact with the level, like igniting a rope with your flame to get shot out of a cannon, which does add replay value because you might not have that power up when you get there. And interacting with the environment with different elements is something that's very impressive on the NES. I don't think any other game was able to do that until Breath of the Wild, which released almost 20 years later. Shut the fuck up. But that's pretty much the gameplay, so let's talk about the levels a bit. They are great, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed playing almost every single one of them, but I really feel like you see everything in the game by maybe World 3. All the worlds look visually different, don't get me wrong, that's awesome, but there's nothing really new being thrown at you, and it kind of starts to feel the same. But like I said, the game is short, so by the time the game starts to get a bit boring, you're almost done. And don't get me wrong, there are definitely people out there that have this as a positive for them. The game plays great already, so the levels being kind of the same just means more levels that are perfectly fine. But for me personally, I would have liked something to spice things up, to change things a bit. I honestly think the minigames had a side effect the devs weren't expecting, where playing them is actually a fantastic side thing to do to mix up the game a bit to prevent the player from getting bored. Or maybe it was intentional. This game was made by God developers, so probably. The levels themselves though has a lot of variation, they're very colorful and they're pleasing to look at. This game looks awesome. Honestly, this is probably one of the best looking games on the system, maybe even the best. Just look at it. Most NES games just have a blank or repeating background. This game has a dynamic one, which is insane for the time. There is also just so much variation to where you are as well. Sometimes it's a beach, sometimes it's an icy mountain. It's great. But as for the gameplay elements for the levels, like I said, it's kind of the same most of the time. It's really just dodge the enemies or defeat the enemies in your way to get to the end. That's how almost every level plays out. And I know you can just have a blank statement like that for most platformers out there. But a lot of the platformers out there at least had something different in between them, like Mario 3 for example. Sometimes you would see giant enemies instead of normal ones. Sometimes there's a level where the sun tries to kill you. Sometimes there's a level where you can play as a shoe. Kirby doesn't really have anything like that in this. It's really just as I said, get past the obstacles and get to the end. And that's pretty much it. I forgot to mention though, you can go underwater with Kirby as well, which is a cool change to the pace of the game. You can't suck or inhale enemies underwater, but you can blow out water at them instead, which knocks them out. But that's really it. It really feels like they just wanted to bank on the power-ups being the more interesting and new experience that keeps players going, which honestly worked for a lot of people. For me, it worked too for a while. I thought it was cool finding new power-ups, but that's about it. But you need to understand something big though. This game came out before most people were born. This game is even older than I am. So if someone played this for the first time, they probably didn't go, oh, that's neat when Kirby gets a new copy ability like I did. They probably went, holy shit! The bosses in this game are also pretty fun and unique. I only really have an issue with the first boss, where it kind of just goes like this. To no one's surprise, of course, almost all the bosses in this game are easy. The second boss is a painter who obviously paints stuff, and then the stuff that they paint gets thrown at you. But the gimmick for this one is you just kind of immediately suck up those things as they come out of the painting and shoot it back at the boss. It's pretty harmless. It is very fun watching the boss paint stuff and the stuff that can come out of the painting though. I think that's neat. The third boss is the moon and the sun, which is honestly awesome. When you fight the sun will charge at you and you just need to avoid it, while the moon in the sky pelts you with stars. After you take care of the sun, the stage transitions, and then you start fighting the moon. As you're fighting the moon jumps around and throws boomerangs at you. I think I might have said moon too many times there, but whatever. While this is happening, the sun goes above you and tries to pelt you with a fiery waterfall. Yeah, let's go with that. I think the duo boss aspect here is awesome, and I really like their phase transition as well. The fourth boss starts with a cool chase scene where you suck up a high jump power up and high jump to get to the top where you fight the boss. You just need to avoid the enemies it throws at you and constantly jump over it and watch out for the lightning strikes it makes. Once it stops making that lightning, you can jump into its eye and damage it and rinse and repeat until it's dead. The fifth boss, I have no clue what this is, but it constantly drills to the right and you need to keep up with it. This is probably a very easy boss if you have a power up. However, I lost mine, so it kind of became annoying. The boss will shoot out an enemy you can suck up and shoot it back, obviously, like most bosses. But this boss digs really fast on an angle, so you won't really be able to keep up if you have something in your mouth. It can make the fight take a bit too long as you need to inhale an enemy and shoot him back at the boss at the perfect angle. If the boss isn't at the perfect angle, you can't do it. The sixth boss is an awesome fight with Meta Knight, and I actually died here. You could run into the sword power up at the start here to have a sword duel with him. If you don't, you're messed in the head. But he will parry your attack, so you have to hit him at the right time. Honestly, this is probably my favorite fight in the game. The tension of having to time your sword attacks is awesome here. I'll go over the final boss in a bit. I went over the presentation of the game a bit ago, and I was honestly blown away. This game has full-on cutscenes before each world. I know they're called levels, but I'm calling them worlds because that just makes more sense. The game is just so cute and charming. There are even icons for each power-up, which is just awesome. I believe I said this already, but I think this is the best looking game on the NES. I will fight you over it. There's just so much variety in the color that you'll be looking at, and none of them look bad. Even the room that's supposed to be dark and simplistic looking looks amazing. Like, look how stylized this is. But that's all I really have to say on the presentation, because if you've been looking for as long as however this video has been going on, then you could tell that it looks great. You have been watching, right? For the story, it kind of goes like this. Everyone on Dreamland stopped dreaming. Kirby thinks that something happened to the Dream Spring, which basically controls dreams in Dreamland. Kirby then rushes off to go explore the Dream Spring and sees that the Star Rod has been broken into several pieces. That is not good. He also sees DDD swimming around the spring, that bastard. So Kirby decides to collect all the pieces of the Star Rod, and he does exactly that after a couple hours of gameplay. Boilers? I don't know what that means. Once all that's done, he goes back to the spring and DDD fights him. DDD as a boss is very simple. You just have to jump over all his attacks. He'll jump at you, he'll sometimes swing his hammer at you. You just have to avoid them, and then he's down. But after that, Kirby wins and puts the Star Rod back in its spot while DDD is begging him not to for some reason. Kirby puts the Star Rod back in place and releases an entity called Nightmare, which absorbs the Star Rod's power, and now Kirby needs to stop it. DDD inhales Kirby and shoots Kirby into the sky, and the fight begins. This fight is awesome. It becomes a shoot 'em up as you fly around avoiding the stars being thrown at you, while using the Star Rod to shoot stars back at the boss. The music here is just so suspenseful. Take a listen. And I can't believe I forgot until this point, but the music in this game is amazing as well. Here are some sample pieces. Anyway, after that brief interruption, back to the final boss. Once you do enough hits to the boss, you take him down, but he flies to the moon and then the boss reveals his true form, which I died to like 5 times. He does his attacks in a pattern, so you get it down after a few attempts. He's just so fast with these sometimes though, which is fine for a final boss, I guess. It's part of the challenge. All you have to do to deal damage to the boss is just hit him when his body is revealed, as it's not always revealed, so your star rod won't work on it when it's not. In the fight, after a while, he will reveal himself and then slowly start coming towards you. This is the perfect opportunity to strike. But some of the attacks he does has him reveal himself for a short amount of time, so if you're skilled enough, you can get in an extra hit. I like this as it rewards skill, but if you're not skillful enough, you can still beat the boss perfectly fine, as after a bit he'll just reveal his body and slowly start flying at you. After you beat him, the moon explodes. Wait, what? But then you get a cutscene of Kirby flying back and waving to DDD, thanking him for trying to hide the star rod from Nightmare, and with that, the game is over. I was expecting this to be like a 6-minute video, and in editing right now it's passing 18 minutes. I guess I like this game, what the hell? My only real complaint is that the game starts to feel a bit samey after a while. Though, like I think I've said maybe 3 times now in this video, the game isn't really that long, so you don't get to feel that for too long, so that's a good positive. And not everyone might not even feel that way. It could just be a me thing. But I do think an aspect of that attributes to how many Kirby games you've played before this, because if you go something from like Planet Robobot to this, well obviously yeah, that one's gonna have more stuff. But if this is your first Kirby game, then you probably wouldn't get that feeling. It also helps if you're not injected with ADHD like I probably am. But even with my one major complaint that may only apply to me, I still think this is one of the best NES games on the system. Maybe even the best, as it succeeded at doing the thing it set out to. Unlike most other NES games at the time, it showed you that you didn't need to make a super hard game for it to be good. You can make a game that's easy and still have a fantastic time with it, which is in essence what the Kirby games have set out to be. Very simplistic games that anyone can get into while still being a great time. But that's the end of the video. I'm tired of looking at him. Thanks for watching. If you liked what you see, please consider subscribing. If you want to see me post fun things occasionally, you can follow my Twitter as well and @OrinClubs. I've also started to stream occasionally, so if you want to see that live, be sure to follow twitch.tv/OrinClubs.